A Husband and a Wife by Sammy Harcum is one of the ones I really liked in this one,
yeah,
too.
Sammy Harcum, I think he always has a story of himself and the Kramers, and often, honestly, they're some of the best.
Yeah.
And he, interestingly enough, even though Kramers has often been known for the non-narrative type, more experimental pieces, Harcum himself has always contributed fairly straightforward narratives, as he does here. This is probably my favorite after Johnny Ryan's piece, and another overt horror piece.
Yep.
With
some weird body thing going on again, and
yeah,
and it was completely silent throughout too, which was neat.
Completely silent story, which is funny. I almost didn't even remember that aspect of it. You know, it almost seemed like beside the point. You know, that the story was told so well about this kind of. I don't know how
husband and wife, and the husband really encounters something that changes him and turns him into
this
something.
Really dysfunctional couple.
Like Victorian era couple or something like that. But
yeah, it's like, I mean, it's you almost want to read this story as like, you know, trying to decipher. Okay, well, this is what Sammy Harcum, the editor, contributed. So this is like, you know, presumably the types of stories he was hoping to get from his contributors. And it's interesting the elements that it has in common with other stories. Because, yeah, you're right, the body horror is similar to Johnny Ryan's, just the fact that it is a horror story. I mean, we had Husband and Wife by Sammy Harcum was horror. Johnny Ryan, of course, was horror. Gabrielle Bell's story, Cody, I'm counting as horror. CF's story was sexual horror. In a way, this is sexual horror, even though there's no sex in it. But that's significant.
There's like nudity and there's suggestion of it, though.
Well, yeah, and the repression of sex and the fear of sex and the you know, all that kind of stuff is going on here in a very interesting way. So I definitely feel like horror is a theme of this volume. So yeah, Harcum's story was I think I started with a point that I lost, as I often do. It was a really good story by Sammy Harcum. I like Sammy Harcum's stuff a lot.
Yeah, it's good.
He's a great editor, and he himself is just a terrific cartoonist. His comic book series Crickets, which is released very infrequently, but the last issue was pretty amazing, and I hope he does more. I enjoy him as a cartoonist a lot, so this is a really strong piece in the book.
Yeah, definitely one of the strongest. Then we get an epilogue by Robert Beatty before there's a little...
And Beatty plays us out with his airbrushed artwork.
And then we do have these excerpts, select excerpts from Ron Embleton and Frederick Mullally. Oh, Wicked Wanda.
Oh man, what are we going to say about this?
So these are really like painted comics.
Yeah, it looks like airbrush to me.
Yeah.
A lot of airbrushing going on in the Kramers.
Lots of nudity
these
stuff.
are not new. These are reprinted from Penthouse. I guess this was like, I'm assuming, kind of Penthouse's answer to Little Annie Fanny from Playboy by Kurtzman and Company. So they're these weird softcore sex comics.
Secret agent type woman or something. All about debauchery and...
Yeah. So what do we make of Harcum? And there's a lot. There's like freaking... It's like a Wicked Wanda graphic novel.
Yeah, there's a lot in
40
here.
pages of these things.
And boy, I stopped after like 2 stories. They were terrible.
I may not have read all of the Wicked Wanda material in here, but what do we make of Harcum's inclusion of Wicked Wanda?
And obviously there's sexual horror in this. It's just women.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, these women are pretty much just like abusing men and kind of mutilating men in some points. And
you know, you might have read further than me, but that's a good point. I actually
see. How can you like an anthology where you have to like stop reading one of the entries?
The Wicked Wanda stuff is interesting. I mean, the inclusion of it is interesting. Why do you think? I mean, it's all contemporary working cartoonists creating new pieces, except maybe for Gary Panter, but it's mostly basically a new piece, creating new pieces for this anthology. And then at the very end of this tightly narratively focused edition of Kramers, we have a 40-page selection of these airbrushed Wicked Wanda comics sex comics from Penthouse. So why do you think Sammy Harcum put these comics in here? Do you think Sammy Harcum thinks these comics are good? How do they relate to the other comics? I think maybe you have a point about the sexual horror, which kind of shows up in a lot of these pieces.
I don't know.
Isn't it kind of... It's such an odd way to end the anthology on, you know? And it's... well, let's talk a little bit about just like this Kramers as a package, which overall I really enjoyed. I don't know how I feel about the Wicked Wanda material itself. I think its inclusion is interesting, but every other piece I enjoyed quite a lot. I mean, I'm thinking probably my least favorite was Kevin Huizenga, and I mean, if Kevin Huizenga is your weak point, you've got a pretty solid book on your hands. You didn't like it as much. Have you read previous Kramers? Okay.
And I've liked previous Kramers. Like, I liked the last one that came out.
Yeah, the last one was the huge, oversized volume.
And then it's smaller, like, samples from artists for the most part.
Yep, shorter pieces, but it was printed like a huge, oversized, like, newspaper... old newspaper Sunday comics style.
And I remember Kevin Huizenga's entry in that one was one of the best.
He did Clouds in that one.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so Kramers we've talked about on the show before. It's kind of the premier art comics anthology. The fourth issue of Kramers Ergot was a watershed moment. Really introduced a lot of these cartoonists and these types of cartoonists to a lot of people, myself included, for the first time. So Kramers is kind of where it's at as far as art comics anthologies go, I think, although there's a lot of good stuff out there. And it always takes a different format. So this year for this Kramers, after this giant, tabloid-sized, expensive art object, we have the smallest, physically smallest Kramers, probably with the smallest number of contributors. Although I'm not sure about that. I guess the other one maybe didn't have a lot, the big one. But it's a much more intimate affair. I kind of think of this edition of Kramers as Kramers Unplugged. It's got a very simple, muted design style by Robert Beatty, as we mentioned. And I think it was... I forget if it was Sean Collins or Jog or somebody who pointed the significance of this out in their review, and that there are blank white end papers in Kramers. Not uncommon for books, but if you know Kramers and the aesthetic art style that's been put forward in previous volumes, it's a lot about marks on paper and filling up space. And this one just takes a really kind of understated approach to its design, and I think to the types of stories that are included in it too. We've got a really straightforward list of contributors at the beginning. If people have read Kramers, they know it's not even always easy to decipher the table of contents in Kramers. This one seems a lot more bookstore friendly, So I think it's really interesting to think about what Harcum's intentions were with this volume as opposed to previous ones, because I think he's a really smart, thoughtful, talented editor. Like, as an editor, he does a great job, and I feel like he had a real vision for what he wanted this Kramers and all Kramers to look like. But I don't think he's interested in stating that straight out. Like, I don't think he'd say, like, I want to do a horror-themed Kramers, But he said there was a particular kind of story that he wanted here, a particular kind of reading experience. So what do you think, how would you summarize the theme of this Kramers? Or, like, what kind of story do you think he was going for based on the results?
Oh, you're asking me? I don't know.
I mean, I feel like it's an open-ended
question. There are definitely things that are apparent in several of the contributions, but not all of them.
Right.
But they are more, like you said, they are more intimate. They are more... there's more pages, so they're more focused on some kind of a narrative.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think. I feel like it's more on the literary end rather than the art for art's sake end of the comic spectrum. There's a few non-narrative pieces here that we pointed out, but they really kind of punctuate and frame the bulk of the book, which is a bit more narratively meaty stories. And, there have been contributions to Kramers in the past that, people have really had to ask and reevaluate, like, is this comics? Like, does this even count as comics? Or are these just pictures? Is this just collage? Mm-hmm. What is comics, right? I mean, those are the kind of questions that Kramers has asked in previous volumes, I think. And this volume is not really about that. I think this volume is really about just providing a really hearty, satisfying reading experience with some really solid cartoonists, less interested in introducing wild kind of untested new talent and just bringing together some really meaty pieces. And I don't know how intentional the kind of horror theme that we've picked up on was when Harcum conceived the book. I'm sure he didn't ask people to contribute horror pieces, because a lot didn't. Mm-hmm. But it is interesting that showed up so prevalently throughout the book, and that Harcum's own piece was a horror story. There's something very unpretentious about this volume of Kramers Ergot. As for the Wicked Wanda, I kind of think Harcum maybe just really likes those comics. Maybe. And wanted to include them in an anthology of a bunch of comics and cartoonists that he just really enjoyed. But I'm not sure I can go much deeper into it than that, because I don't really know what to say other than that about the Wicked Wanda material. I also thought that this volume may have subtly, slightly on some level, been a kind of response to Eric Reynolds' recently concluded Mome anthology from Fantagraphics, which very deliberately from the beginning was meant to be a very kind of bookstore ready publication. It's small in size and resembles a literary anthology, but it also, depending on your perspective, either benefited or suffered from a lack of a real strong editorial vision. Eric Reynolds just the Mome published a lot of these cartoonists, and a lot of great art over the course of its run, but you never had the sense that Mome really had an identity or a mission statement in the way that Harcum always does with his comics. It was just like a bunch of stuff that Eric Reynolds liked, packaged together every month, and a lot of times that was terrific. But Harcum as an editor has a really different approach to his anthologies. So him doing a more kind of intimate, kind of literary focused edition of Kramers, I think, may have on some level been a subtle response to Mome. I mean, that was one thing I thought, maybe. But in any case, I thought it was a good, really good book. But you didn't.
Yeah, it had a few good entries that I really liked, but a lot of them were just kind of like, I'm not going to remember them a day from now.
They didn't make much of an impression on you.
But like Johnny Ryan, he did awesome. Sammy Harcum's is awesome. I like Gabriel Bell's. Oh. I feel like that with anthologies a lot, though. It's kind of hit and miss with the entries. You're going to like some more than others.
Yeah, for sure. For me, this one had a high signal to noise ratio, so I would certainly recommend it.
I don't know if I would really recommend it, but
well, I guess
if you're interested in looking at comics like this, interesting pieces from new or not even just new artists, but rising artists and artists that people really like that push the envelope.
I would say
more the narrative side of the comics.
Yeah, I would say it's some of the cream of the art comics crop right now. Mm-hmm. So it's a good place to find some great cartooning of this type.
That's one good thing about it.
It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
But if you think you would be into that thing, I certainly recommend this or any volume of Kramers.
And anthologies are always a great place to find new artists. So you can check this out, take what artists you want from it, and go find other things from them. You know what I mean? It's like if you don't like everything, you might find one artist out of here that you really enjoy, that you really like their stuff, and that's valuable. I don't know.
Fair enough. Well, we'll let our viewers decide if they want to check out Kramers Ergot 8, but I certainly recommend it.
All right, and thanks for checking out our latest podcast, and we'll see you next time.